guys, welcome to my channel. For those of you who are new, I am too. This is like my first video like this. My name is Belle Arrow. I am an actress and screenwriter living in Los Angeles, California. I am also currently studying as a film student. So that's why I'm making this video today to talk about the things that I'm learning in my classes, particularly the history of animation. And I thought, why not share it with you guys? So let's get into it. Can we just take a second to admire the Disney ears, please? They're so cute. So I will be going off my laptop because a lot of these are through modules and I am not a professional. I do not claim to be one, nor do I want to be one. I just really like to talk about this stuff. So some of this stuff might seem like I'm just reading, and that's because I am. The very first thing that we started with was talking about where the history of animation began, which was in 1878, the beginning of sequential photos. Animation, from what I've come to understand, is all just sequential photos. Back to 1878, before the rise of Hollywood and even the earliest silent films. And I don't know if I'm pronouncing this guy's name right or not, but it looks like Edward Mybridge, Edweird, E-A-D-W-E-A-R-D, Mybridge. So I'm gonna say Edward. Maybe it's a fancy way of writing it, but okay. He showed the world what could be guessed, but at every stage had never been able to be proven. Basically, he wanted to capture every stage of a horse's hooves when it ran to see if all of the hooves came off the ground while it ran, or if they were always at some point on the ground. In the 19th century, it seemed as though Mybridge had used photography to stop time. It also laid the groundwork for modern motion pictures and what we know today as animation. So you can see a video, Mybridges Horse in Motion, and I'm gonna include a link in the description for you guys. So the next thing we're gonna talk about is how animation works. Persistence of vision. Animation works by using an optical illusion. By presenting a sequence of still images in quick enough succession, the viewer interprets them as a continuous moving image. This is the same principle that enables live-action filmmaking and projection to work. Film theorists often refer to this illusion of movement as the persistence of vision. Persistence of vision works because the human eye and brain can only process 10 to 12 separate images per second. Retaining an image for up to a 15th of a second, if a subsequent image replaces it in this period of time, it will create the illusion of continuity. The use of animation techniques to create moving images predates conventional cinema. Devices like the Fantascope, it's a disc that's, they show a picture of it, that you can Google it, I'm sure. And the zoetrope used the basic principles of animation to provide entertainment in the 19th century. Continuing. A sequence of images printed on a spinning drum or disc provide the illusion of continuous motion when viewed through a slot in the drum or on a secondary moving disc. The slot acts as a shutter, momentarily freezing the image. A traditional cinema projector works on the same illusion by actually stopping the film frames. Understanding persistence of vision helps animators to create smooth and lifelike animations in the most efficient way by showing the viewer just enough frames to create the sense of motion. In animation, moving characters are often shot on twos, which means one image is shown for every 2 frames of film, a total of 12 drawings per second. Although this is just on the limit of our persistence of vision, it is usually satisfactory for creating smooth and lifelike animation. Nowadays, luckily, we have a lot more technology where they're not having to draw every single picture. A lot of it is computerized. But back in the day, I could not believe the work that had to go into making these films. It just so fascinating. However, when a character is required to perform a quick movement, it is usually necessary to revert to animating on ones. Alternating the 2 techniques keeps the eye fooled without unnecessary production costs. Cheaper cartoons often work on 3s or even 4s. That is 3 of 4 frames per drawing. This translates to only 8 or 6 drawings per second. Super fascinating. So the first cartoon created, this is pretty cool. The first cartoon created was traditional drawings, which is what we were just talking about, how they just 12 images per second of that film. The first cartoon was screened on the 17th of August in 1908. It was titled Phantasmagoria. It is the first fully animated feature film, not feature length as we know it today, however, and was released in Paris by Gaumont, G-A-U-M-O-N-T, Gaumont Company, created by Emile Cole. I have to Google this real quick to see if Emile Cole is a woman. Nope, man. All right. You know, I will say that in studying film, women were a part of the filmmaking process a lot more than we knew. Back then, yes, acting was dominated by men. The filmmaking industry has been dominated by men for many, many years, even kind of is now, but women are really charging up there. But I did find it very interesting in learning about the history of film, not just the history of animation, but how much female directors really influenced a lot female filmmakers, and also they were most common in the editor's chair. So a lot of women were editors back in the day and created the story. And one thing I found so fascinating, this is off the topic of history of animation, but I thought it was so cool. The reason why they liked having women in the editor's chair is because the director needed to work with someone who could capture emotion and could tell a story and make people feel something. And back then, it was not common for men to show emotion. It was not common for them to feel things so much. So they needed a woman in that position who could connect with that so that they could connect with their audience. I just thought that was the coolest thing to hear and fascinating, you know? So, back to it. Created by Emile Cole, who we now know is a man, Phantasmagoria is considered one of the masterpieces of animated cinema and of early cinema as a whole. Done in white on black style, reminiscent of a film negative, the film broke with the realist tradition emerging in live action at the time. It was much more stylized and fantastic, in some ways anticipating the surrealist movement of later decades. The film was very short. Its projection time was less than 2 minutes. Yet, the amount of work Cole had put into it was enormous, obviously, and the final effect was astonishing. Phantasmagoria was the single most demanding task that Cole had ever attempted as an artist. First, he had made a drawing on white paper with black ink. Then he traced that drawing through a second sheet, changing nothing in the outline except for a minute alteration that would be perceived later as motion. Eventually, hundreds of drawings were completed in this manner, then photographed in sequences. The result was printed in negative, so in the final film, the illusion was produced of white lines moving on black. At the beginning and end, Cole's own hands appeared in positive, necessitating in these two shots the use of white ink on black paper to match the negative animation sequence. Cole made over 700 drawings. 700 drawings. Each one represented one discrete phase, which the projector would eventually synthesize into motion. Even just raising a hand, you can imagine how many times it takes to do that. It's kind of crazy to think about. Okay, so anyways, back to the, okay, so he created over 700 drawings. Each one represented one discrete phase, which the projector would eventually synthesize into motion. Although the film would be projected at the rate of 16 frames per second, Cole guessed that he could cut his work in half by making only 8 drawings for each second, then photographing each twice. The result was a film with extraordinary fluidity of motion, startling perspective alterations, and a convincing illusion of solid frames moving in spatial depth. The impact of Phantasmagoria in the field of animation is long-standing, and its influences are traceable in the work of some of later cartoonists. I'll put a link for this video as well for Phantasmagoria. It was a really cool short that you can watch, and check it out. So the next film that we're going to talk about is A Trip to the Moon, made in 1902. It is the first stop motion animation. So stop motion at its most basic is an animation technique in which a filmmaker physically moves an object, taking photographs of each new position, creating the illusion of movement when the series of photographs is played in a sequence. The Humpty Dumpty Circus, created between 1897 and 1898, is believed to be the first film made using the technique. Directors J. Stuart Blackton and Albert E. Smith used their daughter's dolls to imagine acrobats and animals in motion. Unfortunately, the film has been lost in history. Early shorts like The Enchanted Drawing in 1900 or Fun in a Bakery Shop, 1902, continued the development of stop motion techniques with actors on screen manipulating drawings or piles of dough as if by magic. These are some of my favorite animated cartoons to watch. A Trip to the Moon, most famously, however, magician turned filmmaker George Miles used the stop trick to dazzling effect for his sci-fi short, A Trip to the Moon, made in 1902. So one of the most influential animators created by the great animation pioneer, Winsor McCay, in 1918 is The Sinking of Lusitania, also considered one of the first documentary films ever made. In 1915, a German U-boat torpedoed the British-owned luxury steamship Lusitania, killing 1,195 people, including 128 Americans, according to the Library of Congress. The disaster immediately strained relations between Germany and the neutral United States, fueled anti-German sentiment, and set off a chain of events that eventually led to the United States entering World War I. Since the actual sinking of the ship was never filmed or documented, McCay used animation to dramatize the event, and it was used as propaganda to sway public opinion in favor of the US entering the First World War. What? So in the history of animation, we're talking about, and this is the thing that I love about film so much, is how influential it is to society in history, how it's been used to sway people, to educate people, to inform people. Just mind-blowing. But to hear that this event was then taken and dramatized and recreated in animation to influence public opinion and favor the US entering a world war, that's just crazy to me. Crazy. So the next thing we're going to talk about is Gertie the Dinosaur and Felix the Cat. Early cartoon stars. Gertie the Dinosaur, 1914. Gertie the Dinosaur is an American animated short film by Winsor McCay. Although not the first animated film, as it's sometimes thought, it was the first cartoon to feature a character with an appealing personality. The appearance of a true character distinguished it from early animated trick films, such as those of Blackton and Cole, and makes it the predecessor to later popular cartoons, such as those by Walt Disney. The film was also the first to be created using keyframe animation. The film has been selected for preservation in the United States National Film Registry and was named number 6 of the 50 greatest cartoons of all time in a 1994 survey of animators and cartoon historians. So that was pretty cool. Felix the Cat, feline follies from 1917 to 1920s. Felix the Cat was created by American animator Otto Mesmer. He was alive from 1892 to 1983. Felix the Cat was the world's most popular cartoon star before Mickey Mouse. And both his design and his unique character were highly influential. With regard to design, the ease of animating his simple black and white form was not lost on animators in other studios. Most subsequent cartoon characters exhibit this simplicity, but his wholly original and complex personality was what audiences loved. He was joyous, shrewd, mischievous, and prone to his trademark behavior of walking around in circles when perplexed. Felix's popularity during the 1920s led to his being the first such character merchandised via popular products such as stuffed dolls, keychains, and comic books. The character was also featured in a long-running syndicated newspaper comic strip that Mesmer created in 1923. So now we're here, the moment everyone's possibly been waiting for, the big Mickey Mouse, Disney's Steamboat Willie. Mickey Mouse. The debut of Mickey Mouse and first cartoon with synchronized sound. Okay, so this is what I thought was really cool. It's like, of course, Disney's gonna come along and they're going to up the game, not only to be creating cartoons, but they're gonna be the first that has synchronized sound with their cartoon. So, though it may seem like Mickey Mouse has always been with us, the most well-known of cartoon characters sprang to animated life on November 18th, 1928. The high-spirited, mischievous mouse debuted in Steamboat Willie, a short film designed and animated by Ilworks, the chief animator with the then nascent Walt Disney Company, with direction from Walt Disney. They cast Mickey Mouse as a shipmate on a steamboat captained by a surly cat. Scheduled to be the opening for a feature-length film, Steamboat Willie was given an initial modest run at the Colony Theater in New York. But audiences and critics went wild for the impish, round-bellied mouse, as well as for the premiere of the first cartoon with synchronized sound. 2 weeks later, Steamboat Willie was re-released at the Roxy, also in New York, and the largest theater in the world at the time. It made silent animation obsolete and launched the Disney empire. How cool. Before the runway success of Steamboat Willie, Ilworks and Disney had made 2 shorts centered on their new Mickey Mouse character. Both were silent, neither interested distributors, so Disney changed course. With the success of The Jazz Singer in mind, he directed Ilworks to craft a cartoon specifically for sound. Ilworks delivered a symphony, turning nearly everything in it into an instrument. The 3 whistles atop the steamship, a merry vessel despite its snarly captain, trill out musical notes along with puffs of steam. Mickey Mouse turns the farm animals and kitchenware on the ship into various instruments, squeezing a duck like bagpipes, for example, or playing a cow's teeth like xylophone keys. Meanwhile, the ship's wheel creaks, its smokestacks puff heartily, and background music moves the action along. There is never a silent moment in this cartoon. Disney wanted the sound in Steamboat Willie to correspond with the images. He brought the completed animation to a studio in New York to record its soundtrack with a 17-piece orchestra and 3 sound effect professionals. But their first attempt failed as the orchestra struggled to keep time with the cartoon's action. For their second attempt, the animators added a bouncing ball to the film strip, which was overlapped onto the images to indicate the tempo at which the orchestra should play. How cool is that? I mean, I play violin, so I connected with this very well. Sometimes it can be really hard to keep up with the tempo. And when you watch this short film, you can see that just everything, every movement has it. So I just thought it was so fascinating that they were able to come up with a solution, and that the solution was to put a ball in there that constantly is with the beat so that the orchestra could play and keep up. Just really fascinating. The ball was removed for the film's final cut, so we never actually get to see it, but they just had it in there for the orchestra. This solved the problem and resulted in a precisely synchronized sound animation. Okay guys, so that's where we're gonna leave it for today. That was my first module. Okay, I know I said that we were done, but then I looked and I just thought this would be a really fun thing to have in here to kind of discuss, because the next thing that we did is we had a discussion that was just kind of discussing the first animation that we remember watching. And says, do you remember the first animation you ever saw? If so, what was it and what effect did it have on you? And if I can remember, I'm always at the bottom because I do my stuff last minute. So I said that exactly what I was thinking, which is I don't think I even remember what the first animation was. A lot of them were Disney. They were Disney movies. Yep, this is what I talked about, The Lion King and Pocahontas. So those were 2 of the first ones that I actually remember watching, especially The Lion King. Was like one of the first things that I specifically remember being a kid and seeing. And then I even added in here that I didn't know if there was any influence on this because Pocahontas is one of the first ones that I remember watching. And if you think about Disney movies back then, everything is with the princess, and the princess meets a dashingly handsome prince, and Pocahontas meets a blonde-haired, blue-eyed, you know, John Smith, and falls in love. He falls in love with her. And I just put in here, like, I don't know if there's any kind of influence, but I tended in my adulthood to be attracted to blonde hair, blue eyes. I ended up, you know, my partner is, for those of you who know, Chad Michael Collins, you know, he is blonde hair, baby blue eyes. So I just put that in there because I thought it was kind of funny to think about. So, well, and it makes sense because they were asking, how do we think we've been influenced by this first movie that we've watched? So that's why I brought that up. Oh, I also put in here that she was willing to challenge him. She wasn't a princess that was silent. She was very strong-willed. She didn't fall in line with what people wanted her to be. And I felt that I can relate to that a lot. You know, I grew up in a small town and not too many people understood me in that small town. I was very different because I was artistic and I wanted to be in movies and I wanted to do these things and acting, and you know, in small town in the Midwest, not too many people understand that. So I kind of took a route that was opposite what a lot of the people that I grew up with did. You know, it was grow up, go to college, marry someone, buy a house, have kids, live out your life. I had no interest. It was like, I've got dreams, I've got goals, I'm getting to Hollywood. My head was in stories all the time, you know, and performing. So I also kind of dove deep and thought about how Pocahontas may have influenced me in that direction. Just learning to be a woman who doesn't just fall in line with what everyone else wants her to be. She was also very strong and empowered, and she would fight for what she believed was right. So even when her tribe was wanting to kill the man she loved, and she wasn't allowed to love that man, she threw herself over John Smith to protect him. So what she felt was right, she was willing to stand up and fight for. So that's something that I feel I've taken into my adulthood, that I am not afraid to speak my mind and I'm not afraid to stand up for what I feel is right. Oh, and then when I was talking about The Lion King and how that influenced me, how many people have seen The Lion King and you think immediately of Hakuna Matata, right? So in all, what I felt was really interesting about this discussion was we don't realize how much the cartoons and the animations that we watch from when we were a kid influence our mindset, how we look at things, how we view things, maybe even the kind of prince we're attracted to or the kind of princess we're attracted to. All these things, you know, we're just soaking up. And so it also made me realize what a responsibility animators have to our youth. So there's a lot to be said there. Hope you enjoyed this. Bye, guys.